I'm curious, like, who do you think is going to come out of the woodwork, right? You know, someone at the 11th hour, you know, and claim that, hey, you guys didn't reach out to us, right? Are we missing pockets? And if we are, then who are they? So I guess that's my question to throw out there for now. You guys thinking? Yes.
Unfortunately, I really think that our red district is pretty used to the idea of a red district. And they understand the advantages. And the place that people are going to come out of the woodwork, I think, for our towns, will be when the numbers start to surface. And in Londonderry, in the Londonderry Town News, there was a complete discussion with website and all the rest of it. The select board has been copied by me and also by Jay. Oliver Olson has assisted within the framework of his town. He's been very useful. It's on the Londonderry Town website. So there are a lot of people who know, but they're waiting for the numbers. And that's when we're going to really find out if there's opposition.
I agree.
Do you think those people don't have family in the school system? Or
Many of them do not have families. They know, because Mr. Coleman, the former Board of Education, spent a fair amount of time talking about Act 46, both at town meetings last March, but also went to every single select board to apprise them that this was coming. So, and he's highly respected within our district. And so I think everybody's aware. His final statement was, you can take control over what happens, or most likely, as he said, in 4 years, the state will tell you what to do. And he said, better to take control.
Any other thoughts? Any other groups or demographics we can do better at reaching in our respective communities? Yes, Ed?
Well, I don't know how important these demographics, these groups are to the actual interest in school, but you can't tell. The Rotary and Lions have monthly meetings. The Elks also have meetings. I don't know how often. The veterans, the fire department, all these, and they're often looking for what's the committee member who's in charge of the meetings, and they're looking around. What are we going to talk about this month? So we may be doing them a favor by offering to be on their schedule. Won't be many people in Shine, but you never can tell who's going to raise it. I see it as sort of the phenomenon. I agree completely on when we get the numbers, when we get into the nitty gritty, that's when it's all going to come out. It's like town meeting where you pass $2 million worth of expenses like that, and then spend the next hour on a $1,000 item.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the same thing. When the details are there, somebody's going to get upset about some little thing, and we'll find out then.
Other thoughts? So I want us to think, why don't we come back to the online presence, but thinking of this graphic here, don't ask me how long I put together this sort of thing. But thinking this, we have, what are our common strategies, right? We've heard some already, and what are some strategies and goals that are unique to each of our districts, right? We each, Sunderland and Mount Tabor, right? Those issue impact aid, right? And so there could be, because they're different topics, there could be different goals and strategies. So starting to think about how we can differentiate our strategies by our districts a little bit more. And so what I want to do now is for us to disperse other side of the page, so setting outreach goals and strategies. So what should be the common goals for, we're going to break up into our smaller groups here by our district groups, and what should be the common goals of our upcoming forums and outreach. So I want you each to talk about these. What unique goals do we have? What are our common, excuse me, should I put that twice? Oh, put that twice, sorry. What are our common strategies and what strategies are unique to our district? And so talking about those questions in your smaller groups. And also, I think you hopefully saw it in the reminders in the memo, that if we could start to create a list of who are the community leaders. This is one strategy I thought, and we don't talk about this now. One strategy I was thinking about is, we develop this list of community leaders, right, in our respective communities, and we start calling them, and just, and making contact, right, and with the hopes that this will trickle down, and say, inviting them to our forums. So I just want to throw that idea out there, and start to making it a little more personal, and try to, and to widen our context.
We did a
Our
lot.
contact.
We did a lot of that the last time.
Did you find it effective?
Yeah, but rather than, just, that was all our responsibility. We just, anytime we had two people together, that's what you talked about. And you had to, and even then, there was still a lot of confusion and, it was difficult.
What was difficult about it?
Well, just one thing is hard to just get people to come.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot for them to swallow because they don't understand, what. Now, it'll be easier this time because we've been through it already.
Yeah.
You'll all be explaining what we have now, why we're doing this, how's it going to affect me. It's a lot.
Yeah. So I wanted us to break up and to think about those questions, and also who are the people, the individuals we should reach out to our communities, and who are the groups, right? Maybe it's the Rotary, right? And some other individuals. And if you could put those onto, there's that spreadsheet I put on the memo as well. And if we can start to enter those into those names on there, and if we think that's a good strategy, then we can talk about how we want to communicate with those people, and what are we going to communicate. Okay, does that make sense? So it's the same, Danby Mount Tabor, you guys will work together. Manchester will work together right now. Dorset, you guys by yourselves. Sunderland by themselves, and Mountaintown by themselves. So I guess we can. It's kind of hot in here. We all need to be in here.
See in front of you guys, and that's up there.
All right. So Manchester, you guys want to find a spot? So here's what we'll come. It is 6:30 right now. So let's reconvene, and let's go 6:55. Okay, 6:55, we'll reconvene. I'll get some air going in here. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Throw a monkey wrench in here.
Yeah.
Well, we felt that it might be too early for us to do, in our group at least, to do a forum, because at least in the Mountain Towns Rec, we've been through this before, and we don't have the answers for people. They're going to come wanting to know, what have we decided, how much is it going to cost, when does it start, and we don't know that. And so if we pull them together and we say, well, we haven't really thought about that yet, or, we're not sure, we're weighing this and that, we'll lose them and they won't come back when we have the information. So we'd like to wait until after we have a plan and then go out and sell.
So do you mean mainly the financials?
Yeah, all of it.
As much of it as we
I mean,
can
I
get.
feel like, right now, I just feel like that we're gonna go, if we were to make a presentation between the 22nd and 29th timeframe this month, that's like a week and a half away. Like, I don't have a presentation to make right now, we haven't finished the worksheet yet, And they're gonna go right to we could just present what we have, but they're gonna jump right to the questions that we don't have. They're gonna jump right to how much is it gonna cost, how's this gonna affect the tax rate, what's this gonna do? I mean, they're right on top of that.
Right.
And we're not gonna have, I feel like I'm gonna be up there, if I was up there in a week and a half, and be like,
Yeah, we haven't thought about that yet.
I gotta go to check
Well, then what have
something
you
out.
been doing? Right.
So I guess, what are the goals? Well, should be the goal of the first round of forums, right? Is it to have a big presentation, or is it less formal, more of a coffee with the committee
Well,
members, right?
well,
Nancy, go
I
ahead.
thought the purpose of it was to get information from them.
Yeah.
So I don't think we want to have our plan ready because then it looks to them like we don't really care what we think. So it feels to me that the forums, we have to figure out how to present the basic information about Act 46 and then how to pose leading questions to get feedback. Maybe with some answers we have, but what are some of the questions and strategies that we're wrestling with and need their input?
Okay.
That's
And it's a great idea.
Yeah. You think that's a good idea? Yeah, so I guess that's the
Yeah.
first piece of business, right? What is the goal here? Is it feedback or is it educational?
I mean, I do, I think we do want feedback, but I think like, and I don't speak to the towns that I'm dealing in our district in that, like the specific kind of feedback we're not gonna get that. Like, oh, what do you think we should do SDSU? They're gonna be like, no, the feedback is gonna be like, we hate this law.
Yeah.
Or we don't hate this law. I mean, that kind of specific feedback isn't the feedback that we're gonna get. I mean, we're gonna get like, they're gonna come expecting to ask questions. How is this gonna affect us? How is it? They're not gonna be like, we think you should do this, and then come back and tell us how it's gonna affect it.
Right.
They're gonna want us to be there with answers of how it's gonna affect them. If we're like, well, we're trying to look for feedback. What do you think we should do? They're gonna be like, we're not here to tell you what you should do. We're here to ask you questions about how it's gonna affect
It
us.
may be unique.
Like-
2012 basically is when our red district was formed. That's only 4 years ago. And so the debate was in 2011. There are plenty of people in town that fully engaged. Deb has a great PowerPoint that made some specific issues clear with respect to what is Weston like now. And so it may be our town is unique because we have a wealth of experience going through this process, and we gotten over, and people are very happy with the red district. What they're going to want to know is, what are we going to lose if we get
You're just
something
gonna want to
else?
know the specifics. I feel like if we're like, oh, we're just looking for feedback.
So
Well, to push back on that, if we kept it simple, what have we done so far? What do we know right now? What don't we know right now?
Yeah.
And if we don't have some kind of feedback before September 29th, and if we need to decide in SD versus SU soon, right? And if we don't have something before September, we don't have some kind of forum, right? Giving people an opportunity who are in the know to voice their opinion. What are the optics of that?
Well, if we approach it from the point of view of just setting up what the situation is, as concise a good explanation of 46 as possible. And then say, look, this is something that the state has announced they're going to deal with. If we don't deal with it in this process, it's 46 process. So we have an opportunity here to structure things more or less the way we want them to go as a unified set of towns. And if we don't want the whole schmear to be dictated from Montpelier, we should come up with the concerns we have right now. And what are the advantages? What are we going to lose? What are you most concerned about now? This is going to happen. And we still have control. So what is it you want to keep control of? What is it you're concerned about? So it really throws it up, and this is a little urgency to this because it's going to happen. It's not as though it's going to remain status quo if we just put our heads in the sand and don't do it.
Other thoughts about holding something before September 29th? Other thoughts about that? Jim?
I wasn't going to answer specifically about September 29th, but just in general, I mean, we did an open forum on Act 46 in Dorset. We did it in October of last year. We really had no public discussion about it in an entire year. So, I would side in Dorset at least with having some discussion. And it may not be anything more than what we're putting out in our FAQs. They're not perfect answers. We say that right in there. We don't have all the answers, but we need to have some level of discussion. So, but I wouldn't force the mountain towns, if they feel very comfortable where they are, to have to participate in doing
And
forums.
it could be just a unified forum for pick one location open to everybody, because it is this, or you think it's more specific where towns might want to have.
Sounds like people are leaning towards doing their own towns. Back to the SU versus SD, I don't think the general population is educated enough to give us input on that. So I wouldn't rush putting that specific issue out there to get input. I don't think that would fall in the top, realm of questions that they're gonna want to have answered.
And I feel anyway from maybe the mountain towns, read too, that perhaps we're looking for feedback, that maybe rather than a giant public forum that involves all 4 towns, maybe that's where we go to the select board, the Gerard, own town, and talk to those people who have a finger on the town more. Specifically just that town, so maybe for us, that is what we should do, is go to the select board for that feedback. Because then we can go get, inform them and then easily hear back from them, from their small population that they do. I'm sorry, maybe just bring something out of towns. I just feel like getting something as large as all our towns together and then getting feedback from them would be, but smaller, like you said, just going to the
And that's
select
how
board.
they're gonna vote.
And that's, well, I don't know, I think we have to vote as a district. Did we figure that out yet? How
For you guys,
American
no,
votes?
no, we don't know yet.
Okay.
All right, so let's hear from other, Simon, how about you guys? What would you like to do?
I think we were leaning towards the smaller, more intimate discussions and even some that are kind of informal.
Yeah.
We liked some ideas, like Nancy had brought up, even having just a dinner time informational meeting at Hill Farm.
Yeah.
Or even here at Sunderland, if we were able to have another pasta night or something, that we could just bring in folks, not make it incredibly contentious, and just display the information, let it out, and get questions and feedback.
How about Danby, Mount David?
I think our best bet is to go to where the people are and not try to make them come to us, so we'll just infiltrate and all their meetings and their little get-togethers and just have conversations with people. We'll have that include,
Okay.
just to get it started, just to get the conversation started.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Just infiltrate the meetings.
Infiltrate, that's the
Infiltrate.
Oh, that's a great idea though, that's really the best way to do it, I like that.
Nancy?
In the smaller towns, and probably it's the same with you, is we don't really have any organizations. I mean, Manchester, we do, maybe Dorset does and all. So we really have to go to what are the small groups that are getting together and where are they getting together. We even talked about Meals on Wheels and how do you handle the people that are
I don't
homebound.
I don't disagree with the smallness and the, different establishments in Manchester and the firehouses. That takes a lot of time too. I mean,
It's true.
not only your own personal time, but to get them scheduled and organized. I mean, you might not be getting in front of some groups for,
Couple of months.
for a while. And we might be kind of at the tail end by the time you get in front of some of the groups that you might be writing down tonight. So I'd just be aware of that you'll be tackling a lot in a short period of time to get in front of several hundred people.
Here's some of the strategies that we spoke about in Manchester Group. So developing a list of individuals that we want to reach out to, especially the people who might be opposed to this, right? And start calling them, call people every few days, get them on the phone, and go to where they are too, right? And using mass networks that already exist, and mass events. Like Nick brought up, the Refuse to Use event, right? They're an opportunity for us. There's a lot of people there we can connect with, and in some facet. Writing an open letter to Manchester down the road, right, from the Manchester delegation. Putting the letter to the editor, maybe just about how it's important that we want your feedback. So that was, and then we talked about, what else am I missing, guys? That different from where you've heard, anything else? The Manchester group?
disseminating information through other organizations, like
Yeah.
all the youth athletics. Those are great lists that already exist, that are families and schools, so.
Yeah. But we thought it was, we thought it was important for us to have some type of Q&A, but maybe we were looking to discuss it more. But I think it's, what I'm hearing is that our approaches are, we have different values and different needs, and that, oh, I heard from Jim, right?
Well, go ahead, Mitch.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, the last piece I think is
Yeah.
important.
Well, in our group, we looked at a couple different things, but I think one thing we need to consider, and I was thinking about as we talked about this before we split up, was we're really hitting a lot of people who are technologically savvy. And we're not really, and I'm going to give you a little statistic that I just remember from Dorset. We have the median age in Dorset is about 55. So 50% of the population is over the age of 55. So thinking of my parents who maybe in the 70s and 80s, they're not going to be doing Facebook. They're not going online to look at these newsletters. So what's the media that they look for is Manchester Journal, hard copy paper, who has disappeared from this whole thing in the last couple of months. They haven't. I think we need to kind of get that back into the picture as a common goal for all of us, another article about Act 46. But where the seniors are really your voting bloc, and they're either going to sink it or rise it, or make this thing go. And usually with most seniors, it typically comes down to money a lot of times. So we talked about places where venues where seniors would be. Here's a couple we came up with, was doing an informal talk down at Equinox Village. A senior luncheon in East Dorset. The Dorset Church, which we belong to, we have after coffee hour, we have what's called the second hour of sharing, which is really an informal talk. It could be about anything. Neighbor to Neighbor, another organization, which is senior citizens. I think those are the people that are missing in this whole thing that we started also for. And that was kind of our, what we talked about. But very informal, no presentation, just going in a little, ask them, what do you know about it? We can answer their questions.
Are mailers a possibility too? Do you think that's effective, even though it's expensive?
I think it's so much.
Yes.
Most people feel it's everywhere.
Yeah, save the mailer for when they're ready to get out the vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I would save it to later.
We also mentioned churches.
Save the man until
Oh, churches?
I think the churches is a good idea. It's really
You guys,
nice.
I've asked all the reps to update, to send me their strategies. Can you update those after we meet, and then I'll put these all together, so you can see the other different strategies. And one thing that we talked about in Manchester is developing talking points that are specific to Manchester, specific to the concerns of Manchester, so we're prepared for those. How about Dan and Jackie? Any thoughts about what you're hearing about, how we should approach this?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, the logic originally was you produce a draft list, they get some feedback, and then your objective to get to a vote on is it advisable or not. I think it's great to figure out, what needs to happen, what doesn't need to happen along those lines. But, I wouldn't be wedded to the original design, I would let it evolve.
Well, it's similar, because we still don't quite have a draft, but when
Right.
we want to have a
Yep.
draft, we're ready to.
Yeah.
So does this sound like, moving forward, how does this plan sound? That we share our plans, but it sounds like we have different values and different strategies that are tailor-made to our communities, and that we keep it that way, and that, but be aware of what other communities are doing, so you can steal their
I
ideas.
feel like that we should try to attend the communities.
Oh, that's a good point.
If we're gonna put together a presentation, though, I think we should all use essentially the same one.
Yeah, if there was a PowerPoint, then we should try to use the same PowerPoint.
Individual
That way-
issues can be in there, but
Yeah, if it needs to be tweaked a little bit, but yeah, the basic.
we should work on maybe something.
Are the FAQs the foundation for the talking points? Is that?
Probably.
Okay.
That's your power.
Yeah, that could be our PowerPoint right there,
Yeah.
choosing the FAQs. And maybe for your community, cherry picking the ones that were most appropriate and a priority for your community.
But you want to stay at a very high level, you don't want to get into the weeds
Yeah.
on anything, because then you're lost, and then you just lose them, they stop listening, if you get into just stay way up, 24 font. Really? Yeah.
Are we feeling good about this approach, that we have a tailor-made approach and nothing set in stone for all of our communities? Before we move on, anyone want to add any final thoughts? Okay, so why don't we, how do we have now?
Oh, I have a quick question. When we talk about a common Act 46 synopsis, you've done one for us? Is
Yeah, we could easily, I think that's it's important that you have something common.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that it mostly addresses, we don't need to worry about the parts that don't
Right.
affect us.
Just the nuts and bolts of it, the context.
Yeah, and what
Everyone
affects
should-
us,
Everyone
right.
should work from that. I think
Okay.
it's very helpful.
So can we?
Yeah, I'll work with John on that.
Okay.
You mean outside of the FAQs we've developed? something
Yeah, we
beyond
should
that?
have
Just a presentation.
On what's
Act
Oh,
actually.
okay, okay, I missed the first part. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I think that
Yeah, go ahead.
the PowerPoint that we all looked at was probably directed towards people who are going to be getting into the nitty-gritty and need
Yeah.
to know more about the law. This PowerPoint is, we don't need to get into the same
Right.
level of nitty-gritty.
Well, it's
It should be more
interesting
schematic.
we had a thing last week, and I assumed people had moved on, and they hadn't. So it's really interesting for me to think that there was a certain amount of knowledge in the room about Act 46, and there really wasn't. There was some real misunderstandings. I think I agree there's a line there. I think some context setting is important. But I think it's important that all of you have that basic information going out there uniformly. And then, tweaking or something like that. We can work on that.
So before moving on, do we all agree that we're still one of the primary goals right now of outreach is soliciting feedback, right? And still adhering to this norm we developed, which is committee members and public, committee, where was it? When speaking in public about the ongoing work of the committee, members will try to equally represent the pros and cons of the issue. That's still our norm.
Yes.
Okay, so still adhering to that.
John?
Yeah.
Just curious, because your contact information's on the newsletter, and have you gotten any unsolicited feedback from folks, or put me on the newsletter kind of emails?
Yeah, a few. Not a tremendous amount, a few. And I've gotten feedback from people that I know.
One-on-one,
Yeah, just friends and just people.
Yeah, people like the newsletter.
Yeah.
I get feedback. They say thanks, keep sending it.
Okay. Good. All right, so why don't we do the updates and then we'll take a quick break. So the updates with, starting with Paul at Rupert Wells.
I was there last night, so I'll share it out again. So, Paula Wells and Rupert, this was their second night of meeting within a week. They had met last Thursday. Thursday the 1st, they had a public hearing that was dedicated to just, and Jim was at some of that, was dedicated just to hearing from the public around the issue of designation versus choice. And so to explain that to you, currently Paulette and Rupert, those and Paulette and Rupert, 7 to 12, they designate to Salem and Granville. And Wells has designation to Granville, and students also attend Holt. The price tag on Holt charges a rate that is comparable to Granville of around $9,000. So all of the students, you can imagine what that means for the tax rates there. Their tax rates are low because they are only paying somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000 per student at the secondary level. Because New York just subsidizes their school funding at a much higher rate. So it's not actually what the cost is to educate those kids, but the funding mechanism is different. So it has been a very controversial issue in that community over whether they wanted to maintain that designation as they move forward in this merger, or did they want to move more towards choice in 7 to 12. And that choice, you could still go to Salem and Granville, but you also could go to other schools and maybe get the state union average to attend an independent school over the $9,000. So the issue has very hotly debated. We had about I'd say at least 150 people more, because we had 150 seats last Thursday and we had standing room only. There's people standing, so we're probably closer to 200. And as Dan said, we found out that people had basic things they did not understand. Dan spent a good hour and a half, just really answering a lot of questions around Act 46 before we could even get into the activity of working. We had a very structured, and it was good, we had a structured activity where all tables had to identify the 3 top pros of choice and 3 top pros of designation, but you could tell from that where the group was, just circling around and the board members did. You got a real sense of what was going on. So the committee had planned, they said maybe we will vote, maybe the new merger committee will vote on this at the end of that evening. Some of the members just weren't able to do that. They said they wanted more time to think. So we met again last night. We had a packed house again. I would say at least 100 people, probably more. And there were a lot of new faces. It was not all the same players anymore. So Sue Siglowski, the chair, did allow for some public comment. And that ended up going about 45 minutes. She only allowed people to speak just for 2 minutes at a time, and only people that had not spoken before. And then they went into deliberation. And deliberation, lasted, they deliberated for a good hour and a half before they had a motion was made. And so finally there was a motion made to choose choice in their as they're in their merger committee study under that, as their enrollment option, and we have choice, and that was did not pass. It was a 4-to-5 vote. So 5 folks voted against having choice, and was both of the Rupert merger committee members and 3 of the Paul members voted against it. Wells very much in support of choice. And Wells had really pushing this issue because Wells they were sensitive to a timeline. Tonight, Middletown Springs had asked them to attend a meeting to discuss maybe merging with Middletown Springs. Middletown Springs doesn't have any dance partners. They've reached out to everybody. They're a K6 operating district, 712 choice. And Wells, if this was not going to go towards choice, this committee, Wells wanted out. And they wanted the committee to dissolve, and they wanted out, and to be able to start to enter into conversations in Middletown Springs. So it was quite an evening. We got a motion. Then a motion was made to dissolve the committee, and that kind of took everybody. Was kind of in shock. It was like it took the. I think when that hit, everyone was like, "Whoa, wait a minute! That means like we're done. All this work." And
the merger committee or the audience? Because I would think that the merger committee had anticipated that would happen.
Merger committee, I think when it hit that this was like we're done, I think that got very. I think they knew that might happen, but the merger committee was just reading their faces. They're like, "Whoa, do we really want that? Do we really want this to end right now?"
So don't keep us in suspense, what happened?
I won't tell you all the details. Oh my God, Deb, I thought if Wendell was there, he would have been out of his mind with Robert's rules, because we had so many motions floating around. Holy moly. So anyways, what ended up, so one of the members from Wells she was really something, and she did a really good job. She just really asked them, okay, so what's your plan B? She said, we have a plan B, what's your plan B? And she said, our plan A was to be with you, and that's still our plan A, which was really good because we didn't know that about them until that night. They said, you're our plan A. And she said, I just think you need to think about that. So she posed some questions, and then one of the Rupert members who had voted against it, she said, I think I'm changing my mind. And she started.
There was a motion to designate, and that failed too.
There's a motion there's a motion to designate.
That failed.
And so, that failed. And then
So someone had to have switched for that vote.
So she switched. So one of the members from Rupert, there was a motion to reconsider. And that happened, after about half an hour more of discussion, vote to reconsider. And then it was 5-4 in favor of choice.
Just one person changed.
One person changed their mind. Yeah. So
That's
this is
So
something.
now it passed.
Now it's, and as we kept saying to the community, this doesn't mean that it's passed. You're going to vote on this, but we need to make a recommendation. And it was my take on going through those couple of evenings and listening and watching, and we were inundated. I must have received, in the last 2 days, we probably received 50 letters from constituents around this issue. And it was what we received and what we heard was very favorable towards choice. So it was, I really think it's a good thing that this is going to be able to go before the voters, because otherwise I think it would have been very divisive in the community. The voters need to have a chance to vote on this. There would have been a lot of bad feelings if they didn't get a chance to do that, because I don't necessarily think that some of the committee, the committee members were really representing maybe what their community was feeling.
Now, could they list Middletown Springs as advisable for
So now all these,
everything else
We don't-
opens up? Yeah.
we don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
The committee has to
We
debrief
have
a bit.
no idea.
It's very speculative to say this, that, or,
But legally, I'm saying, would they be allowed to list?
legally, there's paths forward that
Yeah.
are going to be explored. We're going to have another meeting here shortly to start looking at, what are the next steps. But it became pretty clear, I described it as a linear process, that this issue, they couldn't answer any of those other things until they
Yeah.
answered this issue. Now that that has been answered to a certain extent, though I would say I heard one committee member has quit immediately. So, they had norms that said we'll support each other's decision. The majority, one of them has quit immediately. Another one wanted to quit. So we're not sure where the committee's at. I think, let it sink in for a week and we'll meet again and try to figure out what the options are going to be. As Jackie mentioned tonight, Middletown Springs is meeting. But in my mind, it's still, remember the idea was that the committee ultimately has to decide whether it's advisable to merge, yes or no.
Yeah.
So whether it goes, it's premature to say it's going to go to the voters, because this whole thing still could be shut down. So if the conclusion is choice is what we propose, remember they're filling out the template like you are, they answer that question, okay, we're going to put choice in there as our proposal. When they're all done with it, they could say, well, this doesn't make any sense because Wells wants to do that, and we want to do that, and they can shut it down. But we're getting, Jackie's been pursuing some legal advice, and we're getting, some questions answered, but a lot of it's very speculative, I think, to start talking about how it will affect, but, the point for you guys is that, things are happening around you, so this is an example of something that's going to change maybe your disposition to certain things, and what you do changes their thinking too, so it's all, connected, and you just have to keep in mind what's going on.
Right.
And the question did come up a couple of times, and people were asking, well, what happens, where would we go? As far as the connection to you, there's, what SU and the folks that are now, the people like the medical school community, they don't want to leave the RSU, so they're like, where are we going to end up?
So let me go a little bit further. If they continue to go in this direction, they're not big enough to be a standalone district.
That's true.
Do they get some type of workaround because they're not currently, well, they are currently a K through 6 district in our supervisory unit, right?
Right.
So wouldn't the state look upon them to merge with another K through 6 district in the supervisory union?
Well,
Or a neighboring district?
yeah, I mean, when you get back to Act 46, the preferred governance structure,
Yeah.
they are not a preferred governance structure. Okay, so
Right.
they've been pursuing a red.
Right.
We've got to figure out, firstly, which districts are now involved in this conversation. Are other districts going to be allowed to join this merger study committee? Is that legally possible?
Right.
You know, if so, is the preferred governance structure or the enrollment option of K6 choice or K6 operation 712 choice going to hold up through that conversation? So there's a couple of things that have to be hit first, but I'd say, yeah, you come back around to, you know, what's the state's attitude towards this whole thing? You know, and all along, they've been thinking they have to exist inside the supervisory. You know, there's been no doubt about that.
Right.
So what they're doing essentially, firstly, is there a red? If there is, then we have this timeline of July 1, 2017. If there's no red, then they're going to they have to respond to the state by November 2017 with what our plan is to meet the policy objectives of Act 46. And that's going to be forming some other thing that isn't a red. It's going to be some sort of merger that's still going to have to exist under the structure of an alternative, you know, supervisory. And that both supervisory units involved, both BRCU and Rutland Southwest, are going to be redefined fundamentally by Act 46. So it's not clear, you know, how all that would come together. There's a lot of work to be done.
So what are the chances they're going to knock on the door of this committee?
I don't know yet. I mean, it's all speculative. I think, you know, we have to respect they made a pretty big decision the other night. It's gonna take a week, you know, at least to settle out, and then they're gonna pick it right up and start having these conversations.
Just my concern overall is everybody's time frame, theirs and ours.
Right.
So.
Yeah, if the red, you know, the red is the thing that drives a lot of the time right now. And my interpretation, and Jackie would agree, that Wells sort of precipitated this vote because they had a neighbor that was really anxious to get some direction as to where this was going. Because if red was on the table and they had a possibility to be part of it, they wanted to start participating in that homework. But if the red is not on the table, that gives them more time. You know, so it's too early to tell.
What is your sense of what's the future is going to bring? Are you going to see compromise with these 3 towns?
I don't know yet. Well,
I guess my first question is, the threshold is 4 towns, am I correct?
yeah, I mean, to form a red, you have to either have 1,150 students or 4 school districts. So, you know,
And if Paul and Rupert decide that they're going to allow choice, that is primarily the whole issue that Middletown is trying to form their own district. Why couldn't Middletown then join them?
That's correct. So the question is, to what extent is there consensus in Rupert? Is there consensus in Paulett? You know, they are not necessarily of a like mind on this issue. So Middletown Springs, can they be added to this? We think maybe yes, but we've got to figure out. There's nothing in the law about how that happens. But they theoretically could become the 4th district if one of the others wanted to drop out.
Well, isn't there 4th, the Union District, doesn't that Union District count?
The Union District counts as a 4th as part of the red.
Yes.
So right now, Paulett, Rupert, UD 47, and Wells qualify as a red.
Yeah.
But if one, say Paulett, Rupert wanted to drop out,
Yeah.
Middletown Springs came on board, what does that mean for Paulett and Rupert? You know, if they're already joined at the hip under the Union
I
District.
guess I was thinking the other way. It's pretty much inevitable that those 2 towns are ultimately going to stop designating New York schools at some point.
Don't know.
May not happen right away, but if they did, that would be the only thing that's standing in the way of Middletown joining.
Right. I mean,
Then they become 4 towns.
that enrollment option is what's holding things up in terms of expanding their purview. We're just not sure yet how that's going to sugar up. I mean, one of the options, once again, this is speculative, you know, so one of the options is one of those, you're going to come back around number 2 advisable versus necessary. It's the last question. So That's why it's the last question. One of these districts, say one of them was adamantly opposed to choice, the strategy might be to keep them involved in the committee, but now deem them to be advisable, not necessary, because they might have other districts involved in merge or qualify as a red. And that has repercussions for that district being left out by itself. Anyway.
So I don't know if this
The
is.
next 2 weeks, I think is the timeline was.
Yeah, I don't know if this is, maybe it's a small elephant in the room. But, and maybe we address a norm, we create a norm for it when we revisit our norms, sometime soon. But the very fact that, Danby and Mount Tabor are geographically nearby, right? And if you guys are approached and with the enrollment option, right? 7 through 12 choice, having a common enrollment option, right? So how do we, as a committee, how do we handle these scenarios? I don't know if Sunderland, if you're geographically close enough, I don't know, but what you've been approached. So if we agree, can we come to agreement like how we discuss? Do we have an open dialogue about what's been discussed, or
Isn't the framework of that necessary and advisable, which we're going to be talking about within 3 weeks, the place where Danby and Mount Tabor can get a sense of whether or not they're serious about offering and extending you guys something. But it seems to me that we have the capability of allowing you to be advisory rather than necessary if you want to keep open more options. If not, then everybody's necessary, because I assumed that was where we were.
Yeah, I think all this will, hopefully it would all come together timeline-wise. So I think, 3 weeks, as Richard said, you're going to know more about Paul and Rupert. We'll certainly.
I think Danby and Mount Tabor are joined at the hip. We share a school. I don't see that we have the opportunity to go 2 different directions. To be honest with you, the issue that's on the table here that I am most uncomfortable with this group is we haven't taken closing Courier out of consideration, and that disturbs me. I am very concerned about what the future board will do. I fully expect they will close Courier in an incremental way, 1 grade at a time. That upsets me. Middletown's entire sales pitch is about preserving a way of life, and that is incredibly attractive. I don't know that there's support in both towns, though, to go. I think we could pass this group through the voters. I am not convinced we would pass the Middletown proposal through both towns and their voters. So, one indecision in my world. I'd like to see Courier off the table as far as being closed. So far, nobody's saying that. So, where the Middletown proposal does take that off.
we're going to come to the language, the school closure language, and we'll revisit that. Yes.
Just want to let you know too about the non-operatings, just an update on that. So we had scheduled for last night, I was supposed to have the first meeting with our non-operatings that had agreed to enter into formal study, which was Stratton, Searsburg, Winhall, and Sandgate. I heard, we were notified late last Friday, that Stratton had voted at their meeting on Thursday night to no longer be part of that study group and instead enter into a formal study with Searsburg. So Searsburg's meeting tonight. I think they're taking, and on their agenda is that same vote. So that I'm not sure what that's all about. I've reached out to the superintendents to try to get a little more understanding about that. I do know there was some discussion regarding the representation. Those two communities, Searsburg and Stratton, would end up with just one member on the board, proportionally. So that may have been some of the issue. I don't know, but so that So I can't, of course, the meeting was canceled because they don't have enough districts to have a red. And my advice to Lynn Hall right now is just been, just sit and wait and let's see how things unfold because they're not in a rush right now. And we'll see what goes on with your neighbors, just so you know.
Dan and Jackie, since you've been privy to a lot of these meetings, and now I'm starting to think of what's been happening at Paul, Rupert, and Wells in terms of our desire potentially to be a supervisory district. So how does all this start to form in terms of, if they stay in the DRSU, I can't see how the state would allow us to be a supervisory district, then being geographically isolated there.
Well, I think your concern, if your interest as an SD, is to ensure your neighbors have a path forward that isn't dependent on you having an SU. So I think they're, Wells, Rupert, Pollitt, Middletown Springs, there's potential for them to be in a different SU. So if they can get their act together, your interest is just to see stability around you.
Okay.
As long as everyone has a path forward, the state's going to be happy. If it all comes together, the puzzle fits together, it's win-win-win. If someone gets left all alone and there's no one to hook them up with, that's going to be a problem. So I think for your interest, that's how I'm looking at it now, just to make sure that people have a path forward. Okay. So I think right now the biggest concern to that is Arlington. As it stands alone.
Let's get an update there next.
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
Do you know anything?
Well, I spoke with Jude, the superintendent, last week. I mean, they're really waiting. They're watching what's happening with you. They are. That's what they're waiting to. Their plan A, because their plan A is that they would prefer to come to be part of the BRSU if they're a supervisory unit. That's what they would prefer. But they will start to explore. They're starting to have conversations with Shaftesbury. But Shaftesbury, of course, is tied to Mount Anthony. So that's a whole other issue, but they're having conversations with Shaftesbury. So they're trying to see if there are other choices for them, that if this is out of, not a possibility for them. But really now they're just, they're just watching this carefully just to inform what their next steps might be.
Okay.
So I had a question. So you say how we're going to look out for stability around us. Is that something that's in our control whatsoever? Like, how do we affect that stability at all?
Well, I think when you I like the way you say affect it. You affect it by communicating with people, letting them know what you're thinking, so that no one's surprised, and just keeping the lines of communication open. I think as complex as this all is, I think your logic is pretty clear. You need to get financial information to evaluate the pros and cons of an SD. It's certainly very compelling, absent a financial argument that says that you can't afford it. So I think you just keep plowing on that. I think you shouldn't worry about timeline-wise because we're right on track. We're trying to sort of keep everyone moving towards key decisions around the same time frame. So if we can get Paul, Wells, and Rupert to settle out at the same time you're settling out, I think that's about the best we can do. I agree that there's not much Arlington should do at this point other than wait to see what you guys are going to do. But I think that's a concern to the state. You're going to have Sandgate, it sounds like, and Wynn Hall potentially without a home if there's no SU here. So something's going to have to happen. But potentially Battenfield Valley could grow. They could be a bigger SU with Stratton or Sandgate and Wynn Hall plus Meadowy, Wells. So there's options to form different things around BVSU as well that would satisfy the state. So, this will be sugaring out here. Just keep riding along.
All right. Okay. Let's move on for updates. Communication with town clerks. So I email all the town clerks from all our towns, and some I'm going to have to call because I think some of our smaller towns
I don't have email.
No, I didn't say that. Let me finish my sentence. That it's a very part-time job, and maybe they don't check their email all the time in regard to the town clerk. So I'll get in contact with them. But mostly I heard that they would like a vote to occur simultaneously with town meeting. And they said it'd be too confusing otherwise. And so kind of contradictory to what we were thinking, correct? Like we didn't want to confuse, intermingle the two issues. And so that was their logic. And I didn't read the last, did you look at the last email? I didn't, there's one or two I haven't looked at
Yeah,
yet.
they seem to be pretty consistent.
Yeah, yeah.
We've had comments tonight that the typical voter doesn't know what Act 46 is yet,
Right.
nor are they concerned. Mount Tabor, you're going to get a turnout of 15 voters if you have an election for one issue.
Does it have to be an Australian
It
ballot?
does have to be an
Yes.
Australian
And that's all
ballot.
day.
That's a requirement of the
Which
law.
means a 9-hour keeping the polls
Yeah.
open, and
Yeah.
Mount Tabor, they're going to average 2 voters an hour.
I spoke to our, a couple of times, Londonderry's town clerk and ours, about the issue about how we vote as a red. And for them, if we have to vote as a red at Floodbrook, they would hate that. Partly because all 4 of them
And
have
I'll have
to
to be present.
move their polls
Yeah.
to the school, man them with volunteers, have all their polling information is back at the town hall.
I don't know if the polling places have to be in the same location.
Okay, was that,
Yeah.
What?
Has that ever been done?
Yeah.
no, well,
You can have multiple, I mean, like Burlington doesn't, you know, they have
Like a
polling
precinct.
district precincts, right?
Yeah.
So we can do something similar.
yeah.
I think ultimately, no one's anxious at the state to answer this question
Right,
yet.
right, well,
We'll
let's
ask it.
present them with an option
Yeah,
rather than
yeah.
ask them.
They shouldn't worry about it at this point, and we'll get a legal opinion on that.
Right, right. 'Cause
You'll be
the
the first one ever to do it, so.
yeah, the other thing they said that we shouldn't say is that legally the town clerks have no standing in the red. I mean, they are not the red
District clerk does,
Yeah,
right.
which is me. So I,
We deal with this with regular union districts, you have justices of the peace, we supervise, you know, the
Right,
district clerk
right.
sits in supervision of
Right,
the process.
right, right,
But
right,
you don't have, you know.
they pull out their book from the Secretary of
Right.
State about how to conduct an election and all that.
But you know, it is an issue because
Unique situation.
the town clerks are election officials
Right.
in charge of district, school district, and school
Right.
district stuff.
Right,
But in
They
this
have no
case, we don't have
standing.
town school districts.
right,
So we'll figure it out.
right, right. But they don't really want to move themselves to.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be
for the whole-
required.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so we'll return to this issue, but it was pretty resounding from the clerks. Let's keep it the same day as town meeting. So we'll come back to that. Next update is enroll. This is something that came up, I don't know, a couple months ago, Jim, you remember this came up. Just having the numbers for current enrollment by grade in each school, and so we just thought we'd hand out the numbers. And, here they are. I don't know, you know, I was told by the principal that, one of the principals in Manchester, that Manchester's up 22 this year. I don't know where the other schools stand. You're up? You know how many? 87? Floodbrook, you guys have an idea if you're
Yeah,
up?
we're up a little bit.
There's some more.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is off that
I
number.
think we were 274.
We're at least at 90.
Yeah, so you got Sunderland could be up a little?
Yeah, I think that's.
Sunderland's up, if that's
Yeah.
accurate, that's 7 more than what they've had.
Wow, Dorset, you guys have been going up for the last few years.
Courier's up, if that's accurate, Courier's up by 5.
And I think we were at 2.
Manchester's up, right?
Manchester's
We're up
up,
by 22, I think.
Yeah.
We're up by
Yeah.
8.
Wow,
so
all right.
Not an example.
It's not October 1st.
I know. So, yeah, that's unique. Any questions about this before we move on?
could be down in a month, so.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, you haven't factored the dropout rate.
Right.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna reconvene at 8 o'clock to look at the language and what, in that time period, if you would like to have, you know, Sunderland people, you don't have to get a tour of the facility, but Dan, would you do a quick walk around to show us the facility? And
Yep.
we'll come back here at 8 and talk about language.
There's a an awful lot of salad and pizza up here. I don't know.
With or without? It's 8:07.
I think,
All right. So as you see everyone out there, can you yell to them like that? Okay, so I'm going to pass out hard copies of these proposed language. And we'll take it. This was on the memo as well, but here we go. Each. And so, yeah, thank you, Jen and Dan. Thank you for working on this. And whoever else I'm forgetting. And Dick, transportation language, yes, thank you. All right, so I guess let's take these. We'll take these one by one, and starting with. Let's just start with possible school closure language. I think that would be in Article 4. Different studies have done different things, put it different places. Right, Jeremy? We saw it different places, but mostly Article 4. Okay, so read through that, and we talked about tonight. A goal of tonight was to make some progress on adopting some of this language.
Do you want a motion for accepting each one, and obviously can be tabled, but
Yeah, let's take it one at a time. Yeah, possible school closure.
I move the acceptance of the possible closure addendum, which is the first one, Article 4.
Yep.
Somebody has to say.
yeah, exactly.
Michael, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the first one, this would be in addition to what Act 46 provides as sort of a moratorium on disclosure within the first 4 years of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
So this, you can't change that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Act 46 has that provision?
Yes, yeah, it requires a vote of the community in which the school is located in the first 4 years.
So, put that in the article and read it out.
Yeah, it would be a question that we'd have to figure out to make sure. I'm just thinking how this gets fit into the narrative. If you guys approve this as intention, we'd have to make sure it didn't conflict. Or, someone at the state's gonna say, oh, are you meaning to supersede the language of Act 46 or augment it?
Yeah.
So-
Augmented. So.
So
Yeah.
we should include it in here to be clear.
It should be dovetailed
Okay.
and connected somehow. Just to clarify, your intention is not to do something
Right,
against the
right.
law.
So this isn't complete.
Embellish it.
Okay.
So I move the article.
Could I amend your motion?
Yes.
I would like to see language here about removal of grades also. Being the same,
Changing the grade spectrum in a school.
removing 6th grade, removing 5th grade, removing 4th grade from a school in the same article.
So you see,
I think there's I think there's a far greater threat of changing the format of a school to K through 3 than there is a closure. And
Want to
So
take
I
that?
guess I would like to see this same language of 10 out of 13.
Apply to changing of the grade level.
That's restructuring. of
That's
school.
I feel like that's more something I would leave to the board once they're established. The principals are all.
That's why I'm not comfortable with leaving it to the board. I think in our case, the small schools are under threat.
But we've also had a lot of discussion about making additional middle school,
Yeah.
which would pull the older grades into that.
Well, I don't think anybody is, other than MEMS, hadn't thought of that. Maybe they would be concerned about that subject, but Somebody else has something there.
No, we're talking about making
They middle
additional, which would be all of
And I'm not objecting to that.
That
What
would-
I'm objecting to is taking away Sixth Grade.
which would potentially mean sixth grade.
Why would
Middle
you
school
object
is
to
sixth
it?
grade.
6, 7, and 8.
So it's.
I don't, that's why it's 10 out of 13 members. That's really a good idea, 10 people will be easy to convince.
You've got to make the voters of Mount Tabor more comfortable.
It would make this voter,
Now, were you more
and I believe a
I
number
care a
of
lot
others.
to you, and I want you to be comfortable. It seems to me, if we have a good board, and it makes sense to move sixth grade out, we'll get 10 votes to do it. If it doesn't make sense, you won't.
It will be harder to convince
It'll be
10
harder.
people.
Harder to convince a few people, sure.
But where a simple majority could do it, well, I think it's a big step.
So you would like to see the sentence
The language expanded in school closure to school trade.
and any school restructure, using the language.
This is like, I'm not sure I can work
So let me try to understand this. So for Bill, does it have to be tied, that language have to be tied to this?
I'd love to see it tied, but
So Article 4 is about school closure, correct? What is that? What's
It's not just
What's
what's
what
culture.
else does it include?
I think that's the one that's what grade levels, what schools and what grades.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it
This is
does
your
fit
enrollment
there.
option.
So you're really talking
This isn't
about
the entire Article 4, right?
It's one part.
So it's only one part of Article 4 here.
So it may fit in a different part of it.
Yes.
So you're really talking about not allowing reconfiguration without a 10 vote.
Yeah.
In any school.
So I think, I'm wondering if that issue, because we're to come back to the complete Article 4 later, right? And does the issue of reconfiguration have to necessarily be tied to school closure, right? Because you're still gonna have an opportunity.
this is where it belongs.
I agree with that, if it makes good educational and financial sense to reconfigure a school for lots of different reasons, getting 10 votes is a very good threshold to make sure that it really makes sense. I don't have any difficulty of tying the next board to this kind of reconfiguration, especially because we know we just were led through this school where they're running out of room, and it may make very good sense to provide the critical room that they need to reconfigure in somehow.
This would not deny them
No,
that
it
power,
would-
it
but-
just has to be a really popular idea
Now-
among the board members.
Do you think that it needs to have public hearings as well?
It's going to be on their school agenda. We've talked about flexible staffing and moving kids and doing all these things to sort of better serve all of the kids. We need to tie, tie one class to one building. Like to have the board have the ability to build a central middle school and move all the 6th and 7th and 8th graders.
So if in fact you want to leave the decision to the board, you can add to approve the closure of the school or reconfigure a school, and then say nothing more about required meetings and all the rest of it. It would require, therefore, a vote of the current.
Well, I don't know, I think that there needs to be public hearings at the time of closing school, but if they're just reconfiguring, I don't think there needs to be.
Well, that's why I was saying, if you just said reconfigure, then the rest of the paragraph which speaks about closure, which operates the system whereby there would be public meetings and votes and all the rest of it, would not be necessary for a reconfiguration.
So doesn't that speak to separating?
I see what you're
It's like
saying.
making it complicated.
That's fine if you want to separate it, but
Two separate paragraphs, two separate issues.
Separate issues.
So clear.
Can I make a recommendation, and Bill, let me know what you think about this? For clarity's sake, could we, and that's like, I didn't expect that thing, because I haven't even thought about the problem 2 minutes now. Could some language be drafted for us to look at in the next meeting or a future meeting, where we can think about it a little bit, have some time to think about this concept, and because we're going to have to vote on the entire article anyway. And if we could revisit that and have some time to consider that concept, is that, do you understand what I'm saying? If we can separate these two ideas for now.
I'm not seeing them as two different ideas.
Well, I mean, I just don't understand this. This came out of the blue. We've been talking about this whole thing for weeks, and then you just came out with this whole like
But it's an-
configuration voting at it, and it's like brand new to me. So
Jay, it's an important issue.
well, yeah, I understand that, but I mean, we can't. I think it should be separated because it's like we haven't talked about it until all of a sudden this just came
Well,
out of the
actually, there
woodworks.
has been a lot of conversation about it, in that whenever I've expressed the concern of closure, people say, oh, don't worry about that, we're only gonna take grades away.
Could somebody remind me where the language about Article 4 is?
Where is it?
Yeah, I'd like to.
It's in this thing here.
If you look at the worksheet, it's in one of the boxes that speaks to what the topic of it.
Oh, look at the worksheet.
Yeah, I mean, I can bring it up right here. Can you read that out loud, Richard?
Yeah, Article 4, the cost and general location of any proposed new schools to be constructed, and the cost and general description of any proposed renovations. I don't think a great configuration is a renovation.
It's not Article 4.
That's not the right one.
No, that's the right one.
No, that's,
There's articles of agreement, that's not it?
Or that's not the right
No,
article.
that's not the word. That is Article 4.
Sorry.
you have to sample.
The grades, it's Article 3 possibly, the grades to be.
The grades, Article 3 is
operated
grades to be
by-
operated by the union school
Proposed
district.
unit school.
Right.
And then Article 4 is the cost of general location of any proposed new schools. So this
So
is,
they elected to put it in their Article 4.
yeah, this
But you can-
you did it both.
The closure thing could be going in either place. The grade span question probably should go in Article 3, because that's where you're talking about the issue of what schools are going to operate, what grade levels.
Yeah.
So you could have a paragraph in Article 3, you know, that said if the grade configurations are going to change relative to what they are at the time of merger, it shall require a vote of the board at 10 or 11 or whatever it's 10 or 13, in order to change the configurations
Yeah, that's
of
a
any
good one.
school. So you could just add it in Article 3.
Well, what do we feel about that? Having that examining reconfiguration more closely within the context of Article 3. As far as
Is the word reconfiguration actually defined as?
No, I'd want to view.
I would think it was such a broad term,
Yeah.
it could mean so many things.
I would look at that's why I say Article 3, where you're talking already about what schools and what grade levels that are going to be operated. And then I would make a statement like if anything were to change relative to the grade levels at the time of the merger in terms of what grades are offered at each school that would require, you know, so it was clearly tied to the status quo at the time of the merger.
Do we
But you have
have,
to specify that in Article 3, you know, what schools and what grades.
do we have the legal authority to provide some kind of, you know, 3/4, whatever it may be, for reconfiguration for a future board?
Yeah, I don't think you don't have the legal authority. It's the same thing as the 10 to 13 vote on closure,
Yeah.
which, you know, I think the articles of agreement, as long as they don't bump into something that is legal, you know, like the board has authority over grade configurations, the board has authority over closing the school.
Yeah.
So you can put parameters around that as long as you don't interfere with the statutory authority to do their duty. And so far, we've seen the state supporting things like this.
So we do have an amendment to the motion.
I mean, Timoth is 100%, but
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have an amendment to the motion, or the amendment to the the original motion was to adopt the language, correct?
Yes.
And the amendment to the motion was, to have 10 to the third, to have that 10 to 13 language apply to reconfiguration, correct?
But I am not comfortable with
Within
the
Article 4.
reconfiguration
Okay.
because I think there's so much room to
If people are in
reinterpret.
favor of the concept, I will draft some language for you. How's that? I mean, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so,
If you're in favor of the concept, I'll be happy to do that. If you're not in favor of the concept, I won't.
I don't know if we're in favor of the concept.
So I have a question, so would this if we throw that in there, that would mean that the change the grade structure, we would have to have public hearings?
Not interpreting the committee's intent to say no, that we would just have a vote.
Just have 10 to 13
That was what I said.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And that's why we'll start to speak to separating it out.
The new board, you can go to those meetings.
And the board can.
Well, yeah, but that board, they
Not
would
to
just
have
need
a
a 10
special.
out of 13 vote, they wouldn't have to discuss a public hearing as they would for a.
Bill,
And we wouldn't amend
is
this.
it possible we could separate this rather than amend the first motion?
Yes, that's what Dan's saying.
And keep the original motion the way it is and vote on.
Well, your
And vote on a separate motion that would adopt language similar to the 10 out of 13. If a grade, and I'll use the word configuration, but you're gonna fix that
Right, we'll come up with some.
with the appropriate, so that the idea, so that is a separate idea, and I would ask that that vote take place first.
And that would be in Article 3, not 4.
Yeah. And to be included in Article 3, before we vote on the original
Okay.
article.
Sounds like a
So
lot
I
of
would
it.
move that.
So hold on, so the first would, testing my Robert's rules. Can you turn the camera off, please?
The answer is that
So,
it
hold
can
on.
be an amendment.
Yeah, but he hasn't been seconded anyway, so.
And I accept the seconding as I just articulated it.
But hold,
No, it's not. Let's withdraw the motion and start over.
let's rewind that tape now. We didn't want, okay.
Withdraw the
Under that logic, we
motion
don't
and
want to
start
second,
again.
Right? But see, we don't want this amendment to carry right now. So you don't want it to carry either, so you're gonna separate.
I don't mind.
Two motions.
I wanted to separate the
But
two.
his proposal is
Two,
to put it
and
off
put
until
a-
after the other motion is
Just
over.
withdraw the amendment.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Just
Okay.
withdraw the amendment.
Okay, withdraw the amendment, and then I'll withdraw my original
Okay,
proposal.
just get, would you like to withdraw the amendment that's on the?
Okay.
Okay. Is that good enough? Did I follow the rules here?
Yes.
Okay, question, oh, okay, yes,
So on the school closure piece,
yeah.
can we add in that there is an advisory vote by the town in which the building is located?
That's the idea.
I asked this.
No, and actually in the Orange Southwest, it says on July 1st, 2021 or after, it could be closed by 3/4 vote, 2 public hearings, and holding an advisory vote by the voters of the town in which the building is located.
An advisory.
And
I asked that question
And is
too.
that in the first 4 years? Is that what that?
No, it says on July
This is like a public, it's another step beyond a public hearing.
Right,
You're requiring a formal,
advisory vote, right.
Like a
I'm not, I
straw
call it a
vote.
non-binding vote,
it
but
is
it,
non-binding, but it's
Right.
yet another thing you would have to do.
That's an interesting,
right. I thought it might be a rhetorical question, but you are having the same one that I did, yes.
But
how
I
do
don't
we,
object.
how do we feel about
I
that?
guess there's a level of discomfort in it being a vote of the town that the school is located in.
No,
On paper doesn't get any say?
pardon?
On paper
That's
doesn't
what
get any
that's what he's
say?
saying, because the
Yeah.
school.
Just for your district, if they're closing your school, you get say.
If
In
they
the
were
first
closing
4
Front
years.
Rock,
Then only
Then
flood.
only Londonderry would get to choose.
Oh, no.
No, yeah, I see what you're saying.
This
So-
language
Is what he's saying,
on
is
town
because the way it's written.
Oh,
school with the
Oh,
So
I
maybe
see.
some kind of language that speaks about the districts
district
that
that
were
was previously
previous to
established.
merger.
Towns that serve.
No, he's, yeah, that was right.
That language would have to be changed a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah, it's not the school is located, right?
So what does it mean again? I'm confused.
Basically.
What Jessica's reading is the voters of the town
Right,
in which the school is located,
right.
leaving absolutely no power at all
It could
in
be
other
legally
member towns.
interpreted as meaning that Floodbrook is only in the town of Londonderry.
So suppose we want to close Floodbrook, then we have an advisory vote.
Suppose
on it.
Londonderry wants to
previous.
close
But that's, so what he's saying is we
Of the
should
previous
change that
district.
language, because in our situation, there's some schools, if the school isn't in the town, it should have a right to
But
be
vote.
the
but
previous
vote would
district.
take place just in the district where the
Yes,
town is.
yes.
And it would be an advisory.
It'd be
vote.
the advisory, so.
So, I think it's important that we don't have to, we're gonna have to see this, the language again
Right,
anyway.
right.
So maybe it's not important that we have like a formal motion, but more of a straw poll here,
Right.
see where people stand.
Okay.
And, because we're not gonna, I think understanding, agreeing on the concepts right
fine.
now might be more important. Is
I
that,
withdraw my motion.
well, I could be wrong.
No, I think a straw vote is fine.
Yeah.
And then we can come up with the appropriate Article 3 language, and then,
So we're gonna have to vote on these things again.
Well,
And
instead of towns where located, towns,
Previous
member
district.
towns.
Member
Or di-
towns, yeah.
District previous to merger or something like that.
That's just
maybe?
a right to it, yeah.
Member, well, there you go, I guess you're right.
Technically, one
That's
district,
easy.
that's gonna be all of us, right?
We'll figure the language out. Important.
yeah, so
So-
the concept is that the districts, prior to merger, the districts that students went to that school,
Right.
right, they would have the advisory.
Yes.
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 In the first 4 years, you can't do without approval of the original district. Right?
Right. And
So
now,
let's
and
think
you,
about, this is after 4 years,
Yeah.
how much process do you want to have? You know,
I just think it would make the small towns feel comfortable, more comfortable going into this.
These are only advisory votes anyway.
right,
And it's only
Right.
advisory.
yeah, just think of how much process you need, you know, it's like 14 hearings, 2 advisory, you know. It's
No, not 14, just
Yeah.
two. We can vote at the hearing.
oh, right.
Let's get to the straw vote,
Yeah, so
approve the concept. and then-
Who's in favor of this concept of having advisory votes in the towns that are impacted?
After 4 years.
After 4 years.
This is only for closure.
Only for
Only
closure.
for closure.
Only for closure, right.
Okay.
I mean,
Ed, do you support that idea?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you mind sharing why not? Or-
If we're constructing the rules for a new board, and if I make the assumption that the board's going to be people concerned about the children of the entire new district. And the great degree to which you tie their hands in making what they consider to be, after due consideration, which we put in there, it just makes that board function too cumbersome. And I think, I'm assuming the goodwill and their understanding of what's best for the children of all the towns is going to carry the day. And I've been on too many boards where you have to jump through 7 hoops to get anything done, and they don't get much done.
Okay.
So I kind of feel, because that's kind of like half up, down, as it's noted by Rick. So I kind of agree with you. Well, first of all, look at our own town, 4 years out. It would be silly to have an advisory vote at this point in our regional education district 4 years out, which is exactly what this is going to be. But so I see what you're saying. It'll just be another cumbersome move, is all it will be. It won't be necessary. I don't really foresee it. But what it is what I see it as, where I kind of half raise my hand, is because at this point we're trying to convince people to
Yeah,
become
that's
part of
what
this
I was
district.
thinking.
And so even though down the road, I don't think we'll need it. I think it'll just be kind of another loop to jump through, because we're all going to be one district and we're all going to be happy together, you know. Hopefully, but I think that's what's going to happen. That's what's happened to us in the red. And but we need to do what we need to do to make the people feel comfortable right now. We're not talking about really down there, so that's why I kind of have to.
That was
It's
why I had my hand
a
raised.
political decision, is with that as,
It's a huge decision and
Yeah.
it will affect life in the small towns.
yeah.
It shouldn't be taken lightly.
I agree.
I'm not saying that you should eliminate the ability of the board to do it, but don't make it so easy they can do it unalarmed. It's a big deal to the towns involved. It ought to be a big deal to the union board.
Yeah, I'm in favor of starting that.
Okay. And, you know, as we hear this discussion, one thing that comes to mind for me is there some kind of language, quasi-resolution language that we want to put on here? And just as food for thought about the future board making a good faith effort to justify that closure benefits all of our students in the new district. And I know that's, you know, it sounds like a non-binding resolution, but sometimes I wonder if that type of language can carry weight, right? That we are exerting, we're passing on our beliefs through that language. And that's what I've heard from a lot of you is that, you know, trying to expand shift our paradigm and think about the larger, how we're in the same boat. And we have to do what's best for all of our kids. And if school closure means that, it needs to be justified. Yeah.
I'd just like to have, now we're thinking about this, or clarify the status of this. How can, this is in effect the constitution of the board, or charter. How can the new board change the rules in here? What do they have to go
The
through?
voters can change.
The voters can change.
So they can make a proposal to amend the bylaws.
It would have to be
of
voted
sort.
on by the district.
Of sort.
Yep,
By the entire district.
yep,
Okay.
just like they're voting on it now.
Okay, so I recommend we move forward. Are we okay move forward? Yes.
Well, can we also add to this the Act 46 stipulations of
Yeah, I
the
think
4
you're
years
gonna
and all
have
that?
to reference that somehow.
Yeah.
So were those motions withdrawn?
Yeah, so those motions were withdrawn as a straw vote, proving the concept of the advisory vote. And I think what we have to do is come back to this Article 3 language that Bill was speaking of. You know, we need some language to look at here. So would anyone like to draft that language?
I think, I was thinking that Dan mentioned that
Oh, Dan?
we would
Okay,
just put
I'm
it in
sorry.
somewhere. You mentioned, in other words, inserting the 10 of 13 to change the grades in the school would be just something you could add?
Well, I
somewhere?
think I offered to draft some language to make Article 3 work with this in it.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
And I think, you know, Bill's
Thanks.
concerned about the reconfiguration term specifically.
Mhm.
I think it could be clarified by putting it in the same article and
right.
referring to the previous line. I think,
Yeah, I think we need some time to think about that
yeah.
individually. All right, the grandfather clause. We have 2 minutes to reread that.
I think you have to define what a reasonable gap of years.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't really know what it means.
As I read this way, it almost sounds like if you have a kid in the 7th grade now, then, and you have a 2nd grader, then by the time the 7th grader, by the time the 7th grader is in the 12th grade, the 2nd grader would be in the 7th grade and he could still go to that.
Yeah,
That
I think
seems
that's
too
not-
long.
Seems too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So is
that the way it's written and the way you're, I mean, I'm confused on.
I don't know what the language
interpretation.
means.
Yeah.
Until they complete grades 7 through 12. I thought that meant you couldn't have, you'd have to keep,
Well, if you're gonna limit it to a reasonable number of years, you have to specify what a reasonable gap is.
And is it 7 through 12 because there's the one school that has 7 through 12?
There's 2 schools.
Two schools,
Yes,
okay.
Courier and Sun.
Yeah,
So this is one
but
where,
like, why is it, but they 2 schools that don't do 7, 8, so why is it 7 through 12? Is because there's a school that goes 7th grade.
Mill River presently is 7 to 12.
Okay.
But there was
Because
still-
like,
But
if
they
they're
would
just,
still have
kids,
choice
2
for
students
12.
are only in 7th and 8th, is all we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's
It's
only
only
must
like,
have Sunderland's
It's only like,
not
so
there.
For those 2 years.
Just take this
Yeah,
over.
that's-
Yeah.
Goes in there.
but if you have a,
but it talks about 7 through 12.
right, so if you had a 2nd grader, when you have a 7th grader, then the 7th grader would be in the 12th grade, and the 2nd grader would then be in the
But that would
7th
be in the
grade, so
same
that,
school then.
Is that what that means?
well, that's how I read it.
Well, it could be.
Yeah, that's how I read it too, and that doesn't make sense.
If you have, let's use Mill River as an example, it's at 7 through 12.
Yeah,
You have that 2nd grader coming into 7th grade at Mill River, you still have a 12th grader at Mill River,
Yeah.
and you're wanting to grandfather those so they're in the same
So that they
school.
stay. That's what we
Versus
talked about.
one going
Yes.
to, say, Manchester or Dorset, and the other one being at Mill River.
I like it, I don't see why you need to limit it.
Nancy?
I'm just wondering whether, to me, it makes that sense without all the information about that, by just saying, this clause will remain active for families provided each sibling affected is enrolled in grades 7 through 12. Not enough, doesn't matter what the gap is, if they're both engaged in,
We're currently in 7 through 12.
I
At the
think if
time,
Jessica
yeah.
has a child in Mill River and another one being forced to go to MEMS, she's gonna have a heck of a time dropping them off.
well,
both
that's
times
why
at
each,
school.
if the clause is active, if both siblings, or the
Yeah.
siblings affected are enrolled in grades 7 through 12.
Yes, sir.
So my understanding of this, it's just too complicated to written, but, so if there are kids in 7th and 8th grade, at the time it's going into effect, any of their younger siblings that are what? They have to be enrolled in school or maybe 3.
It would have to be any,
They
Yeah, we
get
didn't read it
grandfathered
like
in, or just the kids that are in school, or,
it
I
would
thought
have
it
to be
was,
on age so that when they come to
that shouldn't be.
7th
that.
grade,
That wasn't how I
in the
understood
grade,
it.
they
I
have to
understood
be
it.
in the grade.
If you were in 7th
Just
or
not
8th
because
grade,
you went, it's not a long time.
I think it was, when we talked about it, it was just about kids being in different schools, because you may have some kindergartners whose children, who have another one in 6th grade, by the time they get to 7th grade, the other one will have graduated, so that
so then
shouldn't
it doesn't
count.
count.
Yeah, that should,
Right?
But
Isn't that how we?
that doesn't.
But it really is only for 7th and 8th, because then a family could just choose to go to the same
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know why it's the 7th.
So it's just the 7th
It's
and
just
8th
an
graders.
option.
right, because,
I think those
Will
children who
provide-
are already enrolled, let's say they're in Mill River,
They get to finish that.
they get to stay where they're at until, but once one complete cycle has passed, then parents could make the option of choosing the same school by virtue of planning ahead.
right, because for our kids, for example, the MEMS kids or the reflective kids, you know, when they get to 8th grade, they graduate, and we have kids with families in 7th grade, and the high school kids all go all over the place,
So
so.
does it make more sense putting a sunset year on this for, is it where it completely expires every aspect of it?
Well, it says for children
Yeah.
enrolled in grades 7 through 12.
Right, but do we need to, do we,
Because we have that sunset, and maybe
Do
we
we
can get
have-
around all the other
So
things.
here's what, and maybe I'm thinking about this totally the wrong way, but it's currently the people, the students, families who
Maybe has-
have,
Hold on 1 second.
it seemed to me it's currently the families that have choice for 7th and 8th grade. So if this went into effect, I'm currently in 7th grade, and I have a kid who's also in 6th grade, that's the kid I want to be able to go
Right.
to 7th grade. So then I have my 7th and 8th grader in the same spot.
right,
Then my 8th grader chooses to go wherever they want to go. My 7th grader's now in 8th. The next year they choose to go, maybe they go to separate schools, but that's the family's choice.
Yeah.
So I think it's really the kids currently in 6th, 7th, and 8th get grandfathered
Yeah.
The family would get a choice.
And if it, with the Mill
It's only-
River thing.
What's the,
Sorry, Jay.
No, it's all
you
right.
go, sorry.
Well, but with the Mill River thing, is if they're going to high school in Mill River, that's not our issue.
Right.
If they choose to go to Mill River, that's fine, but we're only concerned about the 7th and 8th.
Right.
So just because you have a 12th grader in Mill River, doesn't mean you get to send your 7th grader to Mill River too.
Right.
Because then that actually makes it, if you were to do that, that makes it unfair to Floodwood students who, I'm going to high school, my kid can't choose. You know, I could choose Mill River, but then I don't automatically get to go to Mill River because Floodwood has. So we should just cut it off, like you said, exactly, on 7th and 8th. Just because your kid is going to school in high school in Mill River when we pass this, doesn't affect your 7th and 8th grade. Because everybody has to choose high school, and everybody has to deal with sending high school kids to a different school than their 7th and 8th graders. So just because you happen to pick that school, doesn't mean that you get to keep on holding on choice for another 4 years of high school. I think.
Can you accomplish that task by changing in the fifth, the bottom line, in grades 7 through 8?
Well, I do
Just go
think
back
that
to the
you need to
six.
bump back to the 6th
Yeah,
grade.
six.
Because if you're trying to handle the situation where a family would then have kids in multiple schools.
But I meant, if they have a child in 7th grade, if they have a 6th and a 7th grader, or a 6th and an 8th grader, the 8th grader's gonna go
Right.
somewhere anywhere, so it
So it's
doesn't
only
matter
for
to the
the
6th grade.
Right.
And if the 7th grader, if it's a 6th and 7th grader, the 7th grader is gonna go into 8th grade, so it covers the 6th grade.
Right.
So the
Because
6th
current
grade,
7th and 8th graders are all covered. I think it, because that's what I,
Right.
Yeah.
So
and it's really only until 2020. Because the first year it applies is 18-19, before the merger goes into effect, which would be the 7th graders. They'll become 8th graders 19-20, and then they will graduate out to school choice.
So is that the
Except in a
concept? Is that
six-year
one?
school.
It seems to be, to me, but,
Can we
can you count on me?
we need any more?
Or it's a family with a 6th grader, it's only the person in the family with a 7th and a 6th grader.
See, I think it ends right after, until June 30th,
Yeah.
2020, and the rest of it doesn't apply, it doesn't sound like, because you're not trying to keep all the kids
Right,
in the same high school and middle school.
right.
Well, if it's a 6-year school,
Well,
But see,
that's not our deal.
that's
That's
not
not our.
well, the language here is 9 through 12. I mean,
Right,
you can
seven.
change that language, but
Well, that's what, I was trying to figure it out
I'm
for
sorry.
Sunderland and the kids that are in Arlington, but the fact is, are
I-
they all in the same, they're not in the same building, junior high? and- Is that grade 7 through 12? So it does apply then to Arlington as it does to the school you're talking
Yeah, I
about,
agree.
to have it go through 12th.
there are families
Okay.
who see
Well,
this
Longtrail
as
doesn't
important.
count.
I thought it meant,
We worked for a couple
All right,
of
well,
I
Jen-
wasn't even
all right.
here.
They're in the grandfather thing.
I thought it was
Okay, I see
cover
what you're
the
saying.
kids, the siblings, the older siblings are currently at Long Trail, for example, in 7th and 8th grade. And they have younger siblings in 4th grade, then they're gonna get to go to Long Trail in 7th grade. That's what I thought.
Okay, that is what we were trying to accomplish then.
That's
That's what we
Sunderland
talked
and
about the
Arlington.
last meeting.
Because that would keep all the kids in the same school, so that was the point.
No, it's only the kid whose brother is there now.
Right.
Right, they're in 7th
But
and
it's-
8th grade at Long Trail, and they have younger siblings, so
Oh,
that they
the
can
6th
all
grade.
go
Oh,
through
no.
Long Trail. That's what
I
I thought.
interpreted it not as being that because you have a high school there, doesn't mean you get to put your 7th grader there too.
right.
Yeah,
That
that's
just
what,
doesn't
that
seem
was the
like it
original.
has,
Just think
So
about it.
that's not
If
right.
you have a 2nd grader and a 7th grader.
Right.
That 2nd grader can hang around into you're gonna hold on to them for 5 years till you get to 7th grade while the other one is up from 7 to 12. Doesn't make any
That's what
sense.
I think we have to, maybe, the best approach is to agree on time span and how long this will be in effect.
Well, you've already got the June 30.
Well, but that doesn't
But-
address, that seems like it doesn't
doesn't.
account for Arlington and Long Trail.
Long Trail and their school, I'm
Yeah.
trying to say, I don't know the name of your
So-
7 through 12
So
schools.
maybe, does this, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because I thought that was the purpose of why we got numbers from all the schools about what the number of siblings were and how many kids this would
See,
actually
I'm
affect.
confused with this, because I thought we were just talking about the 6th and 7th graders, because I don't think high school has anything to do with it. I can't choose to put my kids in the same, I mean, I don't know. I think that's like extending too much choice to parents, I mean.
We'll have people vote against it on that issue.
I think grandfathering.
So currently, how many
Yeah.
how many
Right.
Sunderland students are at Long Trail in the 7th and 8th grade?
Do we have a seventh, eighth grade? I
Sunderland
think only,
has
there might be
two.
3 or
We have the
4.
numbers there. Jim, do you have it right there?
It doesn't say where they go.
Again,
We're talking like 3.
Okay, so except the fact that if people thought, oh, well, my kid could go to Long Trail, my 2nd grader could go there if I get my 6th grader in there next year.
Yeah, right.
And I bet we'd see, potentially could see an increase in Long Trail enrollment just to preserve the option to have a 2nd grader 5 years from now.
It's an expensive preservation.
Yeah, it
That's
does,
great.
it ties the hands of the next board a lot.
All right. Jim, what do you think?
It's not even clear.
So it seems like we're kind of stuck. Well, right, so the time, so maybe we need to, is it either a time period or is it we're looking at for some kind of language around the grades? Yes.
Let's address Jay's critical point as to whether or not the grade configuration should be 7 through 12 or 7 and 8. In other words, just because the kid is at Long Trail in 9th grade and a 6th grader is coming up, it doesn't necessarily mean that the new board would be obligated to send them to that place. So if we can clarify what the group thinks with respect to high school and grandfathering, then I think we can get language which grandfathers appropriately the 7th and 8th grade, unless the group in its wisdom thinks high school should be a part of this discussion. I vote against that. So if we consider that issue, we may get closer to what we're really talking about.
Should we reread our minutes from the last time on number 11? Because it basically
Go ahead.
talks about.
Go ahead.
Because I think it sounds like we all had different ideas of what that conversation was. So number 11, discussion on guiding statement concerning choice grandfather clause for students in DMV, Mount Tabor, and Sunderland. Mr. Wilson shared Mr. Gripp's letter, and the study group had lengthy discussion about grandfathering school choice for families of DMV, Mount Tabor, and Sunderland. They feel that it is not a huge number of students that this affects, and that the district should be as generous to families as possible. They feel that in situations where families will be forced to send their children to 2 different schools, children may be grandfathered into the school of their elder siblings. However, if a child family chooses to break the cycle, the grandfather clause will no longer be in effect. Ms. Rosenthal was pretty statement from the community.
And I wrote a case on it.
Yeah.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
So
I think the question though is that all of the town's students will have choice 9-12.
Yeah.
So I go back to what Jay's saying, like I think the grandfather should be 7th and 8th. And what the expanse of that in the years, I think we can talk about it, if that's what was decided upon, then that's what it should be.
Yeah.
Just because you have a 10th grader at Mill River and you've got a 7th grader coming up,
Yes.
you know, I don't think that applies. I think it's if you have an 8th grader and then you've got a 6th grader who's going to be, that would,
7th grader and a 6th grader,
yeah, so.
because the 8th grader will be gone.
They have to be in 7th grade for this to be
Yeah,
effective.
right.
See, I just want to get everyone here. Any thoughts about Jay's comment or?
I guess I'm open to the generosity of the family too, if that's what everybody agreed, you know, in terms of a family has always gone to Long Trail, has always gone to Mill River, and how many kids does that really?
The one,
You raised a good point though about people finding grandfather clause to be inopportune and use it to their advantage, right? that was not considered before.
That's what I worry about, is that if we did this through the whole high school thing, 6 years down the road, it's still the grandfather. So that's just,
Yeah.
we gotta cut it, I mean, it's just gonna go on forever. And you're gonna have people that will intentionally change
So-
those situations.
Somebody remind me what we're thinking of when we talk about choice for 9 to 12.
That was pushing
That's just
kids to high
right.
school.
They go, family has to pick their high school.
Yeah, that's how it is now.
So, this is academic. They can send their second kid to any high school they want, the same high school where.
Yeah, but we're
Right,
talking
but
because
the
there's some like Mill
elementary
River
school.
School has a 7
So we-
to 12.
So,
That's those are.
So that way they would
Ours
mean
is
that if you had a 12th grader and we weren't specific, that technically you get 2 kids in the same school, your 12th grader could mean that your 7th grader or your 6th grader would still be grandfathered, even though they haven't been in middle school for 4 years.
Right, and we didn't want to inconvenience families by having their kids in different middle schools, which is valid. But everybody has kids, or lots of people have kids that live in middle school and a different high school.
I never thought it was limited to just middle school. I thought we were talking about the families who had been planning on sending their kids to Mill River for 6 years or Andre.
I think
So I
that
think we
becomes
have-
unequitable to
You know, and even when it comes to years down, when we're talking about a possible central middle school, then we'd still have these kids that were
Well,
paying tuition to,
No, because
in
it
other
sunsets
places.
in 2020.
Oh,
The other option would be 7-12 for everyone.
So-
Choice 7-12 for everyone.
This is, we need
Yeah, that's a
to,
good point.
we can't get too stuck in this right now. And again, we need to think about it. So this is where we need to have, before our next meeting, you guys draft your own language. And be able to bring it. And here's something, I think there are too many of us, and it's too limited for us to draft it here, right? And yes, go ahead.
And I don't want to cut you off, so finish your.
Yeah, I'm saying, I think bringing another model to the next meeting for us to look at, right? Because I think we've heard different perspectives, right? And, Jay's, you're definitely in another camp than what's here, right? And so, another model that represents that. I think we have too many other important things to get to let this use too much meeting time, even though it is important. So, can we bring
good idea.
language, okay, if we put it on ourselves to bring language, and you can send it to me ahead of time and I can put it on the memo, language for us to look at ahead of time. And then to really think about it. Okay, and that's maybe should just, if that's gonna, maybe that should be one of our norms too, right? If you have something here in the language that you're not satisfied with, okay, look at it ahead of time, send, because it's hard for us to get amendments on the spot and then try to consider it at 9 o'clock at night. So maybe if we can, get some options ahead of time for us to think about without deliberating online. Does that make sense?
right.
Okay.
So you'll just post all the language that comes in.
When we send the memo, so
Is
this.
that what
John?
you're saying?
Yes.
I want to suggest one reminder, a little fresher, that it would be helpful to me to write down what we agree upon on this, and then what we're trying to accomplish with this language. It seems like we're trying to force the language into a problem, and quite honestly, I'm not clear what the problem is anymore. So maybe having a statement of what we're trying to solve, maybe it's breaking up a family in different schools at certain grades, and that might lend better to writing the language instead of forcing the language into an issue. That's just a suggestion.
Okay. Good. We've got
What we agree on already with the language, and then what additional problem are we trying to solve? Because I'm starting to get confused on that second point.
any thoughts to that?
I think the problem we're trying to solve is the family who's seeing this merger as bad news to the family because their plans are going to be out the window of where they're gonna send their children.
That's fine. I mean, I just, if we start with that written out, then we can talk about that and see what kind of language we can craft to solve that problem.
I
Because
have to-
this is mixing up a whole pot of different issues in my mind, and it's not coming out clearly.
I have to assess the people in the room. I'd say there's a split of people who think it should be a 6-year thing, but of course that wouldn't be the case if we're limiting it to 2020, or whether it ought to be just 7 to 9.
So let's move on. All right, we don't have much time left. Yes, sir.
But did we agree to put this section also into Article 3?
This goes, I think it's Article, that's in different places too. I think it's Article 3 in some of the studies I looked at. Yeah. Yep. All right. So let's try to get one off the books here. All right. So let's just look quickly at 9 to 12 tuition amount language. Right. This is not an article. This is report language. Yes.
The last phrase probably should be struck. I mean, the second sentence, based on a recommendation of newly elected merged district board, the issue could be petitioned directly by the voters onto the warning, so it can go around the board's recommendation.
You're gonna specify which voters.
Yes, the voters of the district.
So
Well, you say that above, but this one,
Decision how much to pay for various school problems, rest for the voters of the unified district, period.
yeah,
And I get rid of
Okay.
that second.
the current arrangement could change for some towns, leaves it vague as to which voters will decide that.
Yep, that's a good point too. I was not speaking about that, I was speaking about up above. Based on a recommendation of a new, the issue can be petitioned, it has in the past when districts have tried to not put it on the article. We're talking about voting in a higher amount than
Yeah.
union average. So it doesn't require the recommendation of the school board.
We strike that. You saying we strike based on a recommendation? by
Yeah,
the new
strike that
board.
phrase,
okay,
would be my recommendation.
good.
And then,
Well, we can leave out the current arrangement would change because
Yeah, do we
whatever
need
it
a
is
narrative
what it
in
is,
this?
no.
This is the report, this is the
Yeah.
narrative.
Okay, we do need that in here,
But
okay.
to Bill's point, you just ended, this would remain the annual decision of the voters of the district.
Of the district. And leave out the current arrangement could change? Or no?
No, it's just explanatory, I mean, it's, it's up to you, it's a narrative.
That would be an annual decision,
Yep.
or
It's an annual.
By law.
so good, so would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move.
I'll move what he said.
I thought we were just doing straw polls till we saw the whole thing.
Well, we actually could vote this one because I think that there's
This is
We're not
this is
changing.
just
Oh,
language. This is not.
eliminating based on the recommendation by newly elected merged district board and adding to the final sentence for the
For the voters of the
the
district.
voters of the district.
Do you have a second for that motion? Wait a second. Any further discussion? So this is just an article language. This is not article language. So I think it's
Narrative.
appropriate. Narrative. So I think it's appropriate for us to vote on. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Right. Okay, so we're at 9 o'clock here.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the transportation and public choice. Would you like to continue or would you like to table it? Continue?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I get a motion to, is there a motion to table?
I'll second.
Motion to table the following, okay, so there's a motion to table, discussion and action on transportation statement and public choice language report. We have a second from Dick. All those in favor of tabling discussion on language, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
There's one thing that I was informed of. Some bus trips now are more than an hour. So I may have to revise that 45-minute figure to account for what already is taking place.
Okay. All right.
So I'll send you the new
Okay.
article.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to have quick, actually, we have public comments. So Mel, thank you for being so patient. Go ahead.
I got been taking notes, I'll try to be as quick as I can. Back to the voting on the same day. I just want to throw out there, I know that some of the towns might have some votes that are contingent upon one another, and it will be challenging to have both those votes on the same day. For instance, our budget and impact aid is a big deal for the town. Will they want to know ahead of time whether we're merging or not, and you know how those kind of things interplay. So voting on the same day would be somewhat of a challenge. For the next meeting, when you have these issues, such as transportation and school choice, I know I've heard from over here from these guys that this is what they really wanted to come here, not so much about how you guys were getting word out to the community. If it's at all possible to switch those kind of items on your agenda. I'm sure that there's a reason for it, but you know, that was part of the comments, stuff that I heard. And on this whole Kate thing, I got to listen to your meeting from last time, yesterday, all 3 hours of it. And it did sound very much like the intention was to not break up families. And I just wanted to point out too, you know, some families have 3 kids, not just 2, or 4 kids. And when you have a K-8 district and all you have to do is go 9-12, you're only talking about 2 schools there that you're splitting your 3 or 4 kids between. But when you're in a K-6 district, you're talking about a K-6 school, and then a middle school, and then a high school. And that does bring up that risk kind of splitting up families. So when I guess listening to the intention of it being not so much that we can preserve this huge choice, but just recognizing that when families really are gonna have a hard time transporting their kids to 3 families, that might be what was the driving force of kind of putting this kind of clause in there. And everything else I can speak myself.
Okay, thank you. So for the agenda for the next meeting, so some of these things we're going to put off until, I imagine, the 29th. At the next meeting, we're going to primarily focus on SU versus SD. So we'll have the financial models by then. And a quick evaluation before we leave.
Another comment well, it was, well, I'll write it to you. In addition to, somewhere we ought to say, you know, in addition to providing best routes, we need to say something about savings. You know, streamlining best routes, doing it flexible. Yeah, but that's what, this is what they're looking for instead.
We've been arguing here for a little while.
No, we're leaving.
Comes up.
All right, so as you're finishing up, the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Yeah, it's hard. Hard to think.
I'll take all the evaluations before you leave, please.
She's just thinking how big, when is the next meeting? The 22nd. So now she did